The next shot is what we call the Piqué shot. So what that is, in fact, I can better to demonstrate it from here. When the cue ball is too close to the object ball to be able to pot it without incident or without the risk of a push shot, if we cue up here, you can see that as my follow through goes forward, it's actually going down more than forwards. If I go 2 inches forwards, there's a push shot. If I go 2 inches through here, it's only going forwards an inch or so. It's only, the tip's only moving forwards an inch because my cue's at 45 degrees. So it, in a sense, you could think of it as cutting your chance of a miscue down in half. So you get the cue up here, and so that time, screw back a little bit. Let's have another look at this. So we go in here. I go a little bit higher on the ball this time. That's called pocket speed. So if you practice those and just get comfortable with how far you can send the object ball down the table, it might be that you're only comfortable sending it half that distance to start with, but eventually you'll be able to play those shots almost length of the table. But you've got to know your limit as well. You've got to know where too close actually is and where the shot's not viable. And that's what this practice will show you, is where you start miscuing. You don't want to be wondering about that when you're playing the shot. You need to know, right, this shot is too close, I'm going to miscue, play something else. Or it's feasible, let's go for it. Now, a couple of little tips here on this one. The first one is to be standing, to get high enough here. What you really need to do is get both feet close together, so you're high. If I widen my feet, I'm too low. And then instead of holding the cue in the normal position, that's just a bit clunky and heavy. If that cueing arm is closer to vertical to the floor, obviously here the cue is 90 degrees to the cue, isn't it? And vertical to the floor. What we want though is remain vertical to the floor virtually. So it's much easier to move the cue and do that. Now, the pullback is really important here. What most people get wrong, if we keep that camera zoom position. Now, what most players do, they do this and they're so far back with the cueing arm, there's so much weight in the cueing arm, the cue just goes forward and they can't pull it back in time, and a push shot is guaranteed. So what they do, what makes it much easier is doing this. So what I would do is practice this first. So practice adjacent to the cue ball, 1 inch backswing, and then 1 inch follow through and pull back. So you go -1 inch, +2, -2. So -1, +2, -2. Okay, so I recommend doing that before you actually go in and hit the ball itself. Now that sounded, anything amusing there? Camera operator finding this very amusing. That might have sounded like a push shot. And granted, sometimes you're going to have a referee who is not familiar with this shot and is going to call you a foul when you've played a genuine shot. That's where you've got to be able to rely on witnesses or argue your case or explain that it was a slight bounce and appeal to the opponent as a last-ditch attempt. I did that once, I remember, in a game. The opponent just stayed quiet. It wasn't for that exact shot, but something similar. It was a free ball situation, actually. Player knew it wasn't a free ball, but didn't back me up, which I was disappointed with. Hendry did it in the World Final, didn't he, against Jimmy? The referee called a free ball, he said no, double check it, and it wasn't. Very good sportsmanship. The other really important thing here is, look, if you imagine, if we zoom in here to the cue ball, would you agree that the tip is in the centre of the cue ball here? Same as here, would we agree that the tip is in the centre of the cue ball, yeah? It is, isn't it? It's vertical, but it's in the centre of the cue ball. But from this position, that's the top of the cue ball. From here, that's centre cue ball, isn't it? From here, that's centre cue ball. From here, that's centre cue ball. What a lot of players get wrong here is they think, oh, if I play dead centre, I'll get a stunt shot. There'll be no screw back to create a foul. So they address what is the centre of the cue ball from the horizontal position here. But that's screw back, isn't it? Would you agree with that? If I hit down here, it's effectively screw back, even with a miscue. So that is a very common thing to get wrong. So get much higher than you think to get your stop shot. And the other thing that this does is it bounces the cue ball, which gives you more time to pull the tip out of the way, because while the cue ball's bouncing after impact with the red, it's up in the air and the tip has more time to come back to avoid the miscue. If you want to screw back, and this is what the Piqué shot is, that's fine, but you need to be able to get the tip out of the way quicker, and we can magnify that Piqué shot here. In fact, Steve Davis played one of these on TV in the Lada Classic once. So if we zoom out a little bit, and so something like this. So that's quite an impressive. In fact, the white's probably moved further than the red there, but that takes a little bit of practice. But as long as you're adept at getting the tip out of the way, it's quite a flash shot to be able to play. But then we've got the horizontal Piqué, which is, let's say we want to put this red in this corner, and maybe it's the ball is a little bit too far into the table to be able to reach a Piqué, or let's say it's here for the sake of argument. And yeah, let's say here. So I can't really reach that as a proper Piqué shot. So who knows the shot here? Any bright ideas? Another clever little shot here. So tip almost touching the cue ball. Push the hand into the cushion. Push the grip hand into the cushion there. So now the tip's 2 mil away from the cue ball. Holding the cue, but my hand is pushed into the side cushion there. See that? So as I hit my finger, it bends slightly, and that extra 5 millimeters is enough to contact the white ball. So we'll demonstrate that with a wider camera view. So there's probably only 10 mil here between cue ball and object ball. This is definitely potable, he says, so wait for the push shot. So now, but again, this is where you've got to be able to practice this, because you've got to know how to set up and how not to set up. So come back, and that's not a push shot. Another clever little shot. With quite a few of these shots, as I said, you've just got to be prepared for 1 in 5 or 1 in 10. It's a built-in risk of doing business that the referee is going to incorrectly call a foul. So based on experience myself, and there's one video clip of Roger Federer arguing the physics of why his ball didn't double bounce before he hit it. And you could use that as an example, but sometimes it is just not going to work because they're not always experienced players. The ones who are will understand it, but have a backup for explaining calmly what happened and why it wasn't a foul. Be ready to escalate it a little bit and get a tournament director and say, look, the white didn't move forward at all, for example. But you can work all this out when you're practicing them. And sometimes it's not going to work. So the attitude to have is, I'm going to give you one shot start, mate, and still beat you. And just make sure you go and win the match. Use it as fuel to your soul rather than fire.